Okay. Hello, Brandon. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me now? Um, okay, I'm responding to your last comments and questions. I loved how you called me a Renaissance man. I think that is a very accurate description. I'm trying to dabble in a lot of different areas. You forgot to mention that I've run a marathon, master's degree. The list goes on and on. But I think I find that about myself is that the list will continue. I doubt I end up being a fisherman for the rest of my life, or as hardcore as I am right now. My guess is that I will find another hobby or something that interests me, and I will get really good at it, and then I will move on. So yeah, a true Renaissance man. Talked about Lex and college. This is something that is constantly on our minds. Doesn't stress me out really. I think it'll all work out in the end. I'm sure of that. So I'm not stressed about it. I'd like to convey that to Alexis as well, that as much as I want to be involved and talk about it, it's not to stress, it's more to plan, which to her probably the same thing. Planning is stressful. So we're trying to ride that fine line. As far as the criteria that she would be looking for is one, she just wants to get in. Whatever school she can get into sounds good to her, and then we'll go from there. Um, for Allie and I think it's a little different. I think if there's, for whatever reason, there's something that interests her, anything that excites her at all about a future location, whether it's here or Japan, we want to thoroughly explore that. So hopefully, as we work through that process, we'll find something that excites her. Okay, people that influenced me. The list is long. My initial thought was to go to folks who have been poor influences in my life and who I've been able to learn from negative experiences, because I feel like those people have far outweighed my positives. But that's probably a personality trait of mine. I like to just look at people from the negative side sometimes, so I can do better at that. And for this exercise, I'm going to list the positive people so I can stay positive. On the the honorable mention list, I would say Mrs. Powell, my first and second grade teacher. Nothing specific, but just I feel like I had a good base there. Oh, and you'll note that these are mostly teachers and coaches. Go figure. I think that notes the importance of our own education and how we're built. So, honorable mention Mr. Winter, uh, animals and snakes and things in your classroom, allowing you to experience something else. I thought that was really neat. I still remember that. Um, Arlie Seams probably would have been higher on the list had it not been for, I can't even remember exactly what happened, but I he kind of lost respect for the man. But how he interacted with not just me, but most of the kids in Bend, and just made us feel like we were on top of the world. Um, a lot to be said for that, and I was really good at football at that point, so easy to make me feel like I was on top of the world. But just in everything, it gave us a lot of confidence and um, helped us move forward. So at the top of the list, the first person that came to mind for me was Brian Crook, baseball coach. I thought he had an incredible way of making you feel really confident, but also worked your weaknesses. Uh, really good example would be batting practice. You know, pregame was just throw you meatballs and let you hit the ball out of the park. But during the week, during practice, he was challenging you and making sure that you didn't just get meatballs, that you were able to hit the balls that were hard to hit too. And he just had a really great energy about him. Always up, always ready to go, always geared up, which is kind of opposite of me. So I think that helped me just push through some of my angst, and got me ready and geared up and ready to go. Um, uh, be an athlete. I say it twice a day probably. Like, come on, just be an athlete. That's absolutely a Brian Crook line. Who's chewing out Peter Dusan. Remember it like it was yesterday. And I will continue to use that line. He also was able to hold me accountable. I remember it was minor issues my sophomore year, but he didn't yell at me. He didn't need to get into me, but he definitely held me accountable. So I like that too. Everybody needs some accountability sometimes. Porcho comes to mind, Mike Chambliss. I always hear him telling us, if you think this is pressure when he's talking about baseball, wait until you're a father of 3 and need to put food on the table. Just put everything in perspective, and allows me to this day to put things in perspective. When I think things aren't going as well or are tough, I'm easily able to look at my life and say, you know what, it's really not that bad. You've got it pretty well, and I think that's what Porcho was trying to do for us, and he would use that line all the time. I'm hopeful. I'm sure you heard the same thing. Coach Todd Irving, he was also a science teacher in 7th grade, but I was probably not paying attention to his science class much, so I wouldn't say that influenced me a lot. But he pulled me aside my sophomore year, back of the bus conversation, and suggested in some terms that I should be on varsity at that time. He was the first person to have suggested that, and really just gave me a ton of confidence that he thought I was a better player and deserved some more minutes up. I proved him wrong my junior year, and probably proved him right my senior year. So, but that he saw something in me and talent that I probably didn't even see in myself was great. I'm going to list Barb McKenna on this for this conversation. Journalism teacher. She did not teach me anything about journalism. What she did do is talk to you like an adult. One of the first people I remember to sit down and actually have an adult conversation with you. She suggested strongly that I not become a teacher. I see why now. At the time, I was kind of shocked that a teacher would tell me not to become a teacher. But I totally get it. I totally get where she was coming from, and she was absolutely right. I would have failed miserably. So thanks to her, I'm not a teacher, library guy. And those are all people that you're probably familiar with. But somebody at Eastern Oregon University, Dr. Greg Monaghan, he was a history professor, so I took a lot of classes with him, but he was also my designated counselor. First 30 seconds I walked through the door, he had me pegged as the aloof athlete with not much direction, just was there to play baseball. He put me in some theater classes, which completely blew my mind and changed my perspective about life in general. And I was hanging out with these theater geeks that I would have otherwise had nothing to do with, but gained a lot of respect for what they do and how they go about doing it. I could draw the lines between theater and sports really easily, and to this day I appreciate that, and I'm thankful that that's what happened. So Dr. Greg Monaghan, history, Eastern Oregon University. He'd always also have us over to his house and like treat us like his students like adults, and that was always fun and nice. So I remember that. I was impacted by that. Okay, I think that was my list. That's non-family members, of course. I can draw a line with a lot of people on this list were people that gave me confidence, and that was always something I feel like to this day I can be self-deprecating and lack confidence. When I'm around my family, I put on the domination hat, which for the most part is true. But out in the real world, I do tend to lack some of that and probably overcompensate with my family, so that's where that comes from. But I mean, everybody can see it. It's pretty clear that I do a lot of good things. Okay, for my question for you, work ethic. Where did you get it? And more like, where do you fall? Out of all the people in your profession or at your organization, are you the hardest working guy? Are you the laziest guy? Are you somewhere in between? and why? Do you see yourself ever like moving into a leadership or administrative position? Is that something you aspire to do, or are you not looking that far ahead, or is that far ahead? Is that something that you would take on immediately? And then whatever kind of work ethic you do have, does that translate well to Korea or the United States? You mentioned that's maybe where you end up landing next. Is your whatever work ethic you have, is that going to be, are you going to fit into whatever organization you are in Korea or the United States if that's the way it turns out? So, like to know more about what drives you and why you work as hard as you do, or why you don't work as hard as you do. Okay, these are fun. I enjoy it. Go Portland, Portland Pickles. Talk to you soon.